Hello everyone, my name's Sarah Salmon. Now for those of you who know me, you'll have heard me remark on the work that so many amazing individuals are doing to help humanity at this moment in time. And my guest today is one such person. She's gathering together women each full moon to help heal the deep collective wound that is sitting in our psyches and our DNA, left over from the burning times at the time of the European witch hunt. She is Cali White. Cali, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be with you today.
Before we sort of start into talking about, the horrors that took place back then, and how they, are still affecting us now, can you just give us a little bit of, insight into your background and what brought you to doing this work?
Yeah, sure. So it's a weaving of a few different threads, really, that came together for me. Well, firstly, I'd spent many years doing personal inner work. I trained to be a psychotherapist. I then went into nature-based work, vision questing, sweat lodges, other rites of passage work, and looking to other spiritual paths, other cultures, if you like, really trying to find my way back, find it to find my own spiritual connection that felt lost. And I'd done years of this work, and about 3 years ago I got to a point of thinking, I've done all this work, I've done all this shadow work, I've cried a lot, I've raged a lot, I've been in therapy, and still there's something, still I'm not finding my joy, there's still fear in me, what is that? And I started to talk to other women, and they resonated and they felt the same, and it was kind of like, oh, so maybe this is more than me, maybe this is more than us.
Yes.
And that kind of led to a bit of an awakening and a realization around the collective wound that many of us have spent years doing the personal level work, and it was almost like we've shed enough of those layers now to be able to access the collective layers, the collective.
Yeah. When you say the collective, for those who are maybe not quite sure what that means, can you just explain that?
Yes. So I at the same time as this was happening, I was also exploring ancestral work.
Yeah.
As a way to, deepen into my own heritage and sense of belonging and all of that. And by collective wound, there are many that there are, there are many that come from, as I trace my ancestry back, trying to find the roots, my indigenous roots, my own indigenous roots, rather than the Native American or the Buddhist, the other cultural paths that I'd followed. One of the big wounds in our psyche is that we have been disconnected from our ancestry, from our own cultural heritage and spiritual belief system. And so as I I researched, I was reading, I was watching YouTube videos, I was going out on the land, I was visiting ancient sites. I then bump into this 300-year period of our history that's known as the Burning Times.
Yeah.
So in 1450 to 1750, not really that long ago. It's like 9 or 10 generations ago. And it was a period in history that affected 15 to 20 generations. And the woundings are many. Men were wounded during this period really deeply, as were women. And I just kind of want to call out that I honor the men in this work, but the men's wound is different to that of the women. So
Yes.
my calling is to the women. With no disrespect to the men, there's great men's work going on, and that's not my calling, so to speak.
Yeah.
During the maybe should I talk about the burning times a little bit and
yes, so set the context, because not everybody, I mean, doesn't tend to be taught really in schools now, and while we kind of know witches were burnt at the stake and things like that, I don't think people have a lot of people don't have a good historical context from what really happened and how horrific it was.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, this is the history lesson most of us weren't taught at school, and yet for me is probably one of the most important ones that we need to know.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful Native American elder teacher, Pat McCabe. You might be familiar with her. And a few years ago, she did some work around this. She started to have visions of women in Europe being burnt. And following that through, what she found was that the men and the people, and predominantly the men who had massacred the Native Americans in the following years, had been the men that weren't able to protect their women at home during the burning times. So when we get into this ancestral work, there's a huge connection between all of us, and to kind of, so to understand what happened during those times. It's a very complex period of history. I'm not going to do it justice, in the time. And there's some amazing books and YouTube videos and things people can watch if they're interested in learning more. But essentially, the witch hunts came out of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was on a mission to convert Europe, to control Europe. And they noticed, the Pope at the time noticed there was an area that is now the Austrian-Swiss border that was particularly resistant to the Catholic conversion. So he sent one of his monks there to find out more. And what he found was the small communities still practicing the old ways, predominantly led by the women. So he comes back, Kramer, his name was, and he writes a book called the Malleus Maleficarum, which also called the Hammer of the Witches. And in this book, he lays out how you define magic, how you identify a witch, how you torture a witch for confession, how you do away with a witch. So pretty graphic, pretty gruesome, pretty one-sided. And this book, we're in the times of the early printing press times, so this was one of the first books that was printed and went widespread across Europe, and it was picked up in Britain. The witch hunts happened all over Europe. Focus is in the UK because that's where I'm based, but our king at the time, or the King of Scotland, James. My head's fuzzy. I never get this the right way around. He was James the Sixth, and then James the First of England, I think.
That's right. Yeah, he was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, wasn't he? Yeah.
This is a time of suspicion and fear and lots of unrest and civil, and this is the period of the Civil War.
And there was still sort of argy-bargy between Catholics and Protestants, wasn't there? And we went burning for heresy and all sorts of things like this as well. So it wasn't a safe or an easy time to live at any level.
No. And most, the population was around 2 million, which is nothing compared to now. And most people lived in small rural communities. They were self-sufficient. They depended on each other. The women would look after each other's children. They harvested the crops together. They shared resources. And don't want to paint a picture of an idyllic time. This was hard living. Bacterial infection was rife. This is a time of plague, of fire. There's electricity, there's no transport. So life was simple, life was hard. And whilst patriarchy already existed, the women still kind of had each other.
Yeah. Mm.
We
They were a
know,
support structure.
yeah,
Mm.
and you know, and they may have been grumpy a bit with each other, and they may, you know, there would have been fallouts, as is human nature, but they depended on each other in ways that we have kind of lost now. And what's really interesting with this, and the other kind of important piece with it, is the science, is bringing in the science, of epigenetics, and understanding that the wounds that were created during these times have been passed down to us, and we continue to play out, albeit they in different ways.
Yeah.
And so
Epigenetics, could we just unpack that a little for those who aren't familiar with that word?
So we know from, first of all, we know from science that as women we have evolved together, and when we are together in safe spaces, in spaces where our nervous system is relaxed and not in fight, flight, freeze,
Yeah.
then our brains release dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all the feel good,
Yeah.
basically. So we need each other for
Yeah.
our health and our well-being.
Yeah.
And during the burning times, our interconnectedness was broken. Women were turned against each other. Women were forced to betray each other. And then, ultimately we mistrust each other.
Yeah.
And epigenetics is when the scientists are proving that the experiences of our ancestors are I'm not a scientist, but here's how it makes sense to me is this. So if I have an experience, a traumatic experience, a difficult experience, my nervous system jumps into fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah.
And I do whatever I am called to do to get out of that situation or to survive. My nervous system then records that as a memory in my DNA. It's encoded into my DNA in case it happens again, but also that coding is passed down to my children.
Yeah. It effectively is where the genetic structure is changed, isn't it? And that change is passed down through the generations until somebody makes another change to it to maybe alter it back to the, release the trauma out of the DNA.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's scientifically proven, that they've now scientifically proven that this does happen. Yeah. I think we probably all knew it at one level or another, but it's only allowed to sort of be so when science has managed to prove it, and they have now, which is really very, very interesting.
Yeah. And it comes through in the resonance when the more women I talk to about this, there's just huge amounts of resonance. And the one of the other important things to understand about the burning times is we're not just talking about the witches themselves. In the UK, the historical records show that there were 1,000 women. Generally in England you were hung, and in Scotland it was more like it was 4,000, and generally in Scotland you were burnt. There's about 40 in Wales, and a smattering in Ireland. And so then, I mean, that it is bad enough, but they're not huge numbers compared to the resonance that so many of us are feeling. And what I've discovered is that, the burning times, like if you're living in a small community, there's a woman being hauled out as a witch. You may have been friends with that woman. She was your neighbor. You are then forced to have to stand by and watch this horrific unfolding of torture, of imprisonment, of shame, of just and then ultimately death,
Mm.
without being able to stop it, without being able to do anything. You know, you were, as a community, you had to go and watch the
Yeah.
hanging
Yeah.
and the
So
burning.
the trauma was shared.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
often, you know,
And the fear. I mean, there must have been huge fear that ran through these communities as a consequence. Who was going to be called out?
and there
Mm.
was a belief that witches didn't work alone. So,
Mm.
you know, you didn't want your name to be called.
Yeah.
And when the witch was tortured, she was asked who else she worked with. So,
Yeah.
you know, there was huge fears were kind of, you know, like
Yeah.
nailed to
Mm.
our psyche at that time, that we can't trust each other anymore,
Yeah.
that we, you know, we can't be honest with each other anymore.
Yeah.
And certain aspects, or I think of there's three core wounds for me
Yeah.
that come out of the burning times that are still affecting us today.
Mm.
One is the we were disconnected from our intuitive knowing and relationship with the land. You know,
Yeah.
in those days, every woman had a working knowledge of herbs and plants
Yeah.
around. There was no medicine. You know, this was the start, if you like, the roots of medicine. But up until this point, it was the knowledge was passed down through grandmothers to mothers to daughters, and it became, and every village had a cunning woman.
Yeah.
Cunning means a person who had a knowing, so an
Yeah.
intuitive knowing.
Mm.
And so it became dangerous
Mm.
to have that, use that, share that wisdom and knowledge. And fortunately, that's coming back, our intuition, that being able to value and connect more intuitively with ourselves, with each other, with life, with nature.
Yeah.
There's a huge resurgence in that, and particularly in you know, plant medicine, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. The second wound was the smashing up of the sisterhood, which I've kind of touched on. So,
Yeah.
been forced to betray each other, no longer trusting each other, and developing survival mechanisms, devices of separation, I call them. So,
Mm.
like, when we think now of, you know, how much we judge each other, how much we might not do it externally, but the thoughts that go through
Yeah.
our minds, we judge, we criticize, you know, whenever we do that, we're holding ourselves separate from that other person. We're not
Yes.
coming into connection with them. So this the and we were forced to compete, and we compare
Yeah.
ourselves to the,
Mm.
you know,
And
and
we judge. I mean, you see it now with the whole abortion thing going on. You know, there are women who want control of their bodies, and there are other women who judge them for that. And it's kind of like, but we're all on the same side, you know, theoretically. Mm.
yeah, and then the third wound is the suddenly the threat for our own survival comes from within our own community.
Yeah.
Ancestors previous to this, that, you know, our history on this land is a violent and a brutal one, that you know, we've been invaded left, right, and
Mm.
center for thousands of years. But here what we find is the threat is, it comes from people we know, people
It's
that we
not from outside. Yeah. Mm.
we
Mm.
can't we suddenly we can't rely on protection from
Yeah.
these
And
other.
you can just imagine, you know, sort of thinking, looking at neighbours out of the side of your eye, and everyone who walks past in your community, you know, is it them? Is it them? What are they up to? And when anything goes wrong, just being really, really on edge about who's going to get blamed for it and how that blame is going to come. Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
as you say, you'll be living totally from an adrenal stress point of view,
Yeah,
and very, very damaging.
which then epigenetically
Mm.
passed on down through the
Yeah.
generations, and it
Yeah.
becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So,
Mm.
you know, if my grandmother has inherited a gene that says women aren't safe,
Yeah.
she's going to live out her life protecting herself from other women.
Yeah.
She's then going to teach my mother that women aren't safe,
Yeah.
then going to live out her life, you
Yeah.
know, with that belief system, and then she's going to pass that on to me. So
And the consequences of that aren't just that you don't see, you know, you are very wary of other women and of that bonding. But also, if you believe that women aren't safe, you're going to keep yourself small to make sure you don't get noticed.
yeah,
Yeah, and because being noticed brings bad things down on you. Mm,
and yes, and so how this wound plays out is, you know, if you take it to the question of power,
mm,
we have been massively misguided around what power really is.
mm,
You know, we have we're at the end of a lineage where power has been about money and wealth and power over.
yeah.
And where we are, my sense is where we are evolving to, where we need to evolve to, is into a completely different way of being, together with ourselves, with each other, with the land. And our power as women comes from within. It's our natural confidence, it's our radiance that,
Yeah.
you know, when we feel good on the inside, when we feel supported,
Mm,
we shine. You know, we shine. We're beautiful from the inside. We not from the youth-centric, media-driven ideals of
mm,
beauty, multi-billion-pound beauty industry that,
yeah.
you know, run on the back of it.
Mm,
It, you know, it comes from within, and it's not about age. You know,
mm,
again, rooted in the burning times is the fear of getting older, because the women that were targeted often were the older women, the
mm,
post-menopausal women.
mm.
Having just gone through my menopause, I'm feeling the power that
Yes.
comes with that in a positive way. That
It's the power of the crone, and it is amazing, isn't it? Yeah,
and
it's
so
very real. Mm,
yeah, there's a wound there that you know, together we have to, we got to heal. We have
yeah.
to change it and come back to our. It's about our authentic selves. You know, power
Mm,
is when we walk in our authenticity as women from a place of love.
mm,
And when we all do that, then power is exponential. Like, we've been led to believe that power is finite. There's, you know, men have had 90% of it, there's 10% left, and the women are, you know, we're forced to scrap over that 10%.
yeah.
See this, I saw this in the corporate world. You know, I spent 13 years in the corporate world in my
Mm,
20s and early 30s, um, and it's just not true. It's not, you know, like our power. It's like, how I think of this is like, I can't shine unless you shine,
yeah.
and you
Mm,
can't shine unless she shines, and she, you know. And imagine a world where we're all walking in our authentic power of love, um, and wanting to bring our gifts and our natural abilities, and you know,
mm.
together we change the world, right?
Yeah, it's and not either or, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely,
Mm,
absolutely. And so the work that I'm bringing through, I'm doing a couple of things. One is, this year I'm on my own 13 moon pilgrimage, driving around the UK and Ireland in my little camper
in your
van.
camper van.
Yeah, the backdrop. And and as this came out of one of the, you know, the threads that I spoke of at the beginning around,
Mm,
I'm so menopause. Who am I as you know, entering my crone years? Who do I want
mm,
to be? Where do I belong?
mm,
Uh, and and what, you know, what's my work in the world? And having done quite a bit of, I trained as an ancestral healing practitioner, and as I was going through that training, I was drum journeying every day, pretty much for about 6 months. And it was
yeah.
during that time that the women, they started to come to me in my journeys, the women from the
Mm,
burning times.
mm,
And they would show me what happened to them, which obviously was pretty horrific.
Yeah, very.
To witness. And what started to happen was that it would come through in my body, so that I'd have a somatic experience during these journeys. Deep grief, huge level, rage, fury at the injustice and the horror. Just how, so it's like beyond belief. And then came the terror of being visible, of stepping up, of being in my power, of having a voice, all of these things that so many of us resonate with. And so one of and what I noticed was, the more of this, the emotion I cleared, the better I felt.
Yes.
We've got to feel it to heal it.
Yes.
And
it's not a head exercise.
It's in our bodies, epigenetically, it's in our bodies.
Yeah.
So I took a couple of things that are guidance from spirit, from my guides, and weaving in the research that I've done, and the years of women's circle work I've kind of been involved with. One is every full moon for 13, I'm gathering women across the country to hold ceremonies in honor of the ancestors that suffered during those times.
Yeah.
We journey to meet them. And there's an invitation to feel the feelings, to express that somatically, and then we hold ceremony I'm using silver medicine spoons. It's an instruction, and collecting them to be part of a bigger collective process at the end of the track. So I've done 8, and there's 5 still to go. And then in and around,
and they're open to any woman.
Yeah. So and the dates and the locations are on my website. So anyone can find them there. And
I mean, the next one I know is in South Wales. It's coming up. I think it's next week, isn't it?
Next week.
And I'm hoping to be there. So I said I'm looking forward to it, sort of, with some trepidation as well, to be frank with you.
And that's completely normal. And and come anyway,
Yes, absolutely. But I mean, we've got to find the courage to go to these dark places, haven't we, to release that energy out of the collective psyche.
Absolutely. Love and light is all very well, but it comes through facing the darkness. We can't have one without the other, and this is brave work. And what kept coming to me was that this is a collective wound, and therefore it requires a collective healing.
Yes.
And so we are doing it, and bringing it in a way that we do it in a group, in a small group. It creates safety for ourselves, of course, and we're there for each other. And it's just beautiful work. It's life changing. When we connect with our ancestors, before we do that work, we call in our loving, guiding ancestors from way before then. So to feel the power of our lineage is a life-changing experience for many of us. We've never thought about that. We've never really felt it.
I mean, that disconnection we have, not just from other women, that lack of bonding, but the disconnection from our ancestral support and lineage, it's our normal, and actually it's a deeply unhealthy normal, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And and no fault of our own. It's like there's no judgment. Acceptance and forgiveness is a really big part of it.
Yes.
And we can't get to the forgiveness until we felt the feelings.
Yes.
So my work is an invitation to come and do your work.
Yes. And it's a safe space, and again, it is a circle of women, and everybody, I mean, these circles can be so powerful and so supportive. amazing energy in what comes out of it. And this is what, as women, we are so good at doing when we allow ourselves to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And I also want to just name that there's huge shadow in our sisterhood.
Yeah.
And red tents are great, moon lodges are great, and it's absolutely fantastic that they are springing up across not just the UK but the world. And I've sat in women's circles for 15 years or so now, and they've been a phenomenally important part of my healing journey. And I've seen the shadow, and I've felt the shadow, and I've experienced the shadow, and sometimes these circles break down because we aren't naming the shadow, we're not aware of it, we're not bringing it into the light. We're competing, we're projecting, we're jealous, we're envious of each other. It's like we're still projecting the power through in the old patriarchal model, that paradigm. Feminine leadership, feminine power is collaborative. It's not hierarchical, it's cyclical. So we got to call some of these shadows out. And what the witch wound shows us is that we carry both sides. We aren't just all the victims here. We are often carrying the energy of the perpetrators. There's always there's the oppressed and the oppressor. There's the betrayed and the betrayer. And we have the potential to do both. And we have done both.
Yeah.
In outside of the ceremonies, I also am running full day workshops called Healing the Burning Times, and in on that day we're calling out, like, okay, how have I been hurt by other women, but also how have I hurt other women? It goes both ways. And this is not inner child work, this is
this is inner adult work.
Adult work. It's like time for the big girl's pants, right? It's about growing up. We're growing ourselves up. It's about being able to tolerate the discomfort and to own it, and through that we transform ourselves and each other and how we are living on this planet, because God only knows, like with climate change and everything else, like the time is now. As women, we have to step up. We've got to come back into really healthy, supportive relationship with each other. We were the village. The women were the village, and we have lost that to a large degree, not everywhere, but culturally in the mainstream. And we've got to start stepping up in ways that are life sustaining rather than life destructive.
And limiting. I mean, we've put ourselves into a very limited container as well from all of this. Well, what can I say? It's fantastic work you're doing. I mean, I think it takes a huge amount of courage, and you've very clearly given over a big chunk of your life at the moment to doing this. You're living out of your camper van. You're moving around the country doing this and doing this work, and that's not a little thing, and it needs to be honoured. So yes, thank you for being brave enough to step up.
Thank you. And I just a final point really is, in doing this work, I am healing my own witch wounds, right? So one of them was, I never ask for help. I have to do everything myself. I've got to do it all on my own just to prove that I'm good enough, and so in this work I'm deliberately changing my patterns, because the epigenetic understanding is all well and good. We can release the you know, clear the trauma, but
Yeah.
we've then got to rebuild a new patterning. We've got
Yes.
to rewire ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. We've got to get rid of the old habits.
And so I put a call out at the start of this year to about 60 women who are part of the Women in Power community that I've been part of for about 10 years now. And, you know, the response was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I really couldn't be doing this without their support. You know, they are hosting many of these ceremonies, uh, the full moon ceremonies.
Yeah.
They are offering to host the workshops that I'm running, offering beds for the night and a hot meal and a hot shower when I need it. And I'm really feeling them. You know, I'm feeling them there, encouraging me on. And when I share things about my story, it's like we share so many.
Yes. Yes.
So my final little bit is, you know, just to say thank you to you as well for the work that you're doing, for giving me and others this opportunity. And you know, I've been aware of all the ancestral work that you've been bringing through, and it's phenomenally important. So you know,
Well, thank you for that. And I have to say, I see the, you know, the work that people like you are doing, and as being like bits of a jigsaw puzzle. There's a lot of people doing amazing work all around the world to try and bring round the changes and release the fears and the traumas, and make a cleaner, better, brighter future for us as a species. And it almost feels like people are working in isolation, but they're not. They're all putting in place a piece of the bigger picture. And yeah, it just takes courage, and it takes commitment to stand up and do that. And yeah, all power to you for it. So bless you.
thank you very much. Thank
And
you.
I shall hopefully be joining you at the next Women's Circle. But for everybody who's watching, I'll make sure that your website goes up and they have the means to contact you. So if they want to join in one of the other circles, or even come to the one in South Wales, they can do so and be part of this amazing work, because it is transformational, isn't it? It's not a little thing.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for finding the time, Cali, and for sorting things out. I know you've had to sort of set yourself up somewhere especially and get a good signal and all sorts of things like this to do this. I really appreciate you making time for this, and I'll get this out as quickly as I can to everyone who's watching. And yeah, keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Go well. Blessing.
And you. Bless you. Bye.
Bye bye.